Hey, what's up, guys? Alex here again. Uh, I just flew back to Ukraine. From Valencia, where I had my race. So it's about well, close to midnight to where I am, and I just wanted to record a small video, I guess. This won't be so much of a data rant as as my other videos were, because there's not much data to talk about. I do have all the data from the weekend except for the race, because it makes no sense to take the data from the race. But it's it's not very relevant, to be honest. So anyway, let me just put some onboard from qualifying, just to play in the background while I try to speak. So this is the kind of the regular onboard. We have aim camera, and if you are into motorsport, like, say seriously, I don't mean karting. I mean like big cars, motorsport. The camera would probably be the only thing you would want to buy from AIM, to be honest, because the rest is shit. But the camera is quite good. So we have some overlay here, as you can see. Oh, God damn it. Disregard the dates, the times, because nobody cares, so nobody sets them correctly. Disregard the fuel level as well, because again, nobody cares enough to set it correctly. It's not 98, it's qualifying, okay. Oil pressure is probably correct, although I would like to see some decimals here. I don't know why are they not there. GBXT this is gearbox temperature, this is oil temperature, water temperature. I mean, all this shit is irrelevant. You don't need to have this on the video, but it's it makes the picture look nice. This is your G-forces. This is not super accurate either, so again, kind of irrelevant. Who cares? This is speed. This is the 25 thing. I don't know what the fuck that is. Minus 16. I don't know what that is. 25 is probably the brake value, to be honest. I mean, it looks like 25, right? But 25 of what? Probably 25 bar, because there's no percentages on the real car. And this is probably the throttle value. Makes sense. I don't know what the minus means. So this is our track map of Valencia. Obviously, we're going counterclockwise, which is quite unusual for European circuits. Well, gear, of course, RPM, all of that. What else? Well, yeah, pass lap, blah blah blah, and this is self-explanatory. So this is more or less how the cockpit looks like of the LMP3. Obviously, I'm sitting here. This is my hand with sparkle gloves and the nice wrapping on the steering wheel to match the the color of the car, which is completely by accident, by the way. I mean, I have like tons of these wrappings with me, like in my actual gear bag, like the not the bag that I care to that I did compared to some to the last test in Manicure. I mean, I just took my normal bag, my travel bag with my I don't know, my socks and my underwear or whatever. But then I have the actual gear bag, which normally stays within the team if I'm doing the whole season, so I don't bother to fly with it all the time. And in that bag I have shit tons of various stuff, and one of the shit tons is, you know, these wrappings. And just like I said, by coincidence, I just happened to have the green ones. I don't know what I'm talking about this so much. Anyway, and by the way, in case you're wondering, these are just regular tennis racket wrappings. There's nothing special about them, and just, you know, the steering wheel is quite thin, and then when it's thin, and especially when it's slippery, your wrists get tired, because you have to squeeze the wheel much harder than you would have wanted, because your hands obviously sweat, so the gloves are wet from your sweating, and yeah, your hands slide against the steering wheel, unless you have like something like this. Anyway, so this carbon shit is just in air. It's basically an air intake to have some sort of ventilation inside the cockpit. The part of this hose is how do you say, is blocked out, because if you remove this, then there's too much air coming into your helmet, and your eyes start to get teary, because we normally drive with the visor open. I mean, there's no incentive to keep the visor closed most of the time, so if you have a lot of air blowing into your face, then obviously you get teary, and not in a sentimental kind of way, but like in an uncomfortable kind of way. So these two here, it's not very visible, but it is actually a small display with a button. It's all black because the camera is kind of, I don't know, too contrasty. So this is driver ID, and what it does is you can push the button and it changes the number, and here is a small reminder for drivers. Number 1 is Daniel, which is my teammate. Number 2 is Alex. Obviously I'm number 2, so I'm driving right now. And what it does is it changes how the transponder on the car reports like its ID or whatever to race control, so they know which driver is driving. And obviously you can say, well, what happens if I don't change the driver ID? Well, it wouldn't change if you don't change it, but you're incentivized to change it, because in most championships, actually in all championships, there is a minimum required driving time for each driver, and the driving time is counted, by the amount of laps or minutes, to be more precise. And for that, the race control needs to know which driver is in the car. So if you forget to change driver ID, the other driver may not get his minimum driving time, and you get disqualified. So yeah, normally the driver who is getting into the car changes the ID for himself. So it's the responsibility of whoever is going into the car, not the driver who's getting out. So now we have these two blue devices here that says race logic. I mean, it doesn't look, it's not very visible, but trust me. And this one here on the right hand side, also the blue one, it's also race logic. So what this one on the left hand side does, it's connected to CAN. You can see the connection. CAN is CAN bus is, well, you could argue it's like a network to which all the components, well, all the thinking components of the car are connected to, like ECU or and TCU. TCU is being transmission control unit, and data logger, steering wheel, all that shit. And then this thing displays how to say it, like your performance lap to lap. So it logs the best lap time, but not as in one value, but like a continuous sort of string of values. I don't know. Point is, when you do a corner, this thing tells you on a per corner basis if you did it better or worse than the whatever reference it has inside of it. And normally the reference that it would have inside of it would be the fastest lap. You can put any reference, but again, nobody bothers to do that, so normally it just it has the fastest lap inside of it as a reference. So it's a very useful tool actually, because you can immediately see if you did something better or worse, and it also gives you a delta in seconds on a per corner basis, like how much are you losing or gaining over the reference at a particular time. So you don't have to wait for the start finish line, you know, to cross that to see the to see how much how well you are performing, if you are performing well. So this is what this thing does, and it picks all this shit up from CAN bus. Yep. Then this thing on the right hand side, it's actually mispositioned at this point because I was setting it up, and to set it up you need to be able to reach the buttons. There are buttons here on the panel on the right hand side of the right hand side panel, so they put it closer to myself, to the driver. But normally this thing is located there. You see this white patch? This is actually like a sticky pad, and normally it would be there pointing to that direction, to the left hand side of the car. And what it does, this is the pit timer. Okay, so we again, in most, if not all, championships, you have minimum pit time, like well, I shouldn't say in all championships, in a lot of championships, but not in all of them. So in regulations there would be something like you have to stay in the pit lane for, let's say, 70 seconds, right, minimum. The reason why they do that is to avoid the drivers rushing to change, or mechanics rushing to change wheels and all that stuff. And if refueling is allowed near the box, then obviously if you have a lot of time, then everybody is calm and relaxed, and there is less possibility to make a mistake. So it's kind of a safety reason, and yeah, it's same for everybody, and it's in regulations. In ELMS it's not like that, it's a bit different, but in this championship the minimum time in pit is quite high, so it's quite easy to change drivers and everything. And then this thing, well, yeah, and the pit time is not is not the time when you're standing still near your box. How they measure it is when you come into the pits, as in you cross the loop on the entry, and then you cross the loop on the exit. So this is the time between the entry exit is what is considered pit time. But obviously, when you come in, you are going at 60 kilometers per hour as per pit lane speed limit, and when you come out, you are also going at some speed. So to know, how much time do you have to stand still precisely, so that when you exit, the whole sequence would take the appropriate amount of time. To know that, you need to know how long it takes for the car to from entering the pit lane to the stop near the box, and how long it takes from starting to move from the box till the pit exit. So then you can calculate for how long you have to stand still. So this device is something that makes this a little bit easier. And the why it's positioned like this is because it's not for the driver, actually, it's for the lollipop man. And the lollipop man would normally stand on this side, on the left hand side, because it's an anti-clockwise circuit. And he would show you the lollipop, like start engine, go, whatever. And to know when to show you the lollipop, he's looking at this thing through the windscreen. And so this is basically for him. And excuse me, I'm having a sip of wine. And you may wonder, like, why the fuck do you need a lollipop, right? Because the driver can look at the countdown and know exactly, how many seconds he has left, and then take off and go exit the pit lane. You need the lollipop man because you cannot see shit in your mirrors, like literally. So without the lollipop man, I cannot see any traffic coming from my left hand side in the pit lane. So I may as well exit into someone else. It's really difficult, And remember, you cannot really turn your head to the left or to the right, whatever. I mean, you have windows in these cars, but you cannot turn your head enough because of the horns. So basically, what Lollipop does, that he acts like your mirror. He ensures that you will not crash into someone when coming out of the pits. It's the same shit as in F1. Basically, it's same concept. All right. So what else is interesting here? Well, you have a screen, windscreen wiper, which is very bad, by the way, but it's better than nothing. These are wheels, so you can actually see the tires, and when I resume the playback, you will see how they react to the bumps on the track. And if you don't know Valencia, I mean the Ricciardo Tomo, or whatever they want to call it, Valencia, not the street circuit Valencia where the Formula 1 was. It's a quite challenging track physically. You can see on the map here, there's not so many straights. Like, this straight is relatively short, this is very short. So as a driver, you don't have any time to really rest. Like, all of this is very, it's corner after corner. So Valencia is considered one of the hardest tracks physically for everyone, to be honest. And yeah, the fast corners is turn 1, which is this one, which is on your screen, and this corner they call it a chicane, but it's not really a chicane, it's just a corner. Yep, this is your regular hairpin. These are regular 90-degree corners. This one, just regular 90-degree corners. This is weird. This is a bit weird as well, but this is a hairpin. This is very weird, and this is super weird. But like this section is relatively straightforward. Alright. So this is qualifying. This is the whole session. It's just 10 minutes, so I just thought I would play it in the background while we're listening to some nice lounge music. The way the qualifying works in this championship is well, the way the weekend works in this championship. So you have 3 sets of new tires, right, for the whole weekend. And by weekend they mean starting from qualifying. Then you have 3 qualifyings, because normally there are 3 drivers in each car, so each one of those get to qualify, and then they average the times to determine the starting grid. And this is important because they don't average the positions in each qualifying, they average the lap times. So yeah, 3 sets, 3 qualifyings, 3 drivers, which is let's say most commonly used layout by everyone. Now we had 2 drivers, so which is also allowed by the championship. It's okay to have 2, and it's actually beneficial from the sporting side of things. So myself and my teammates were the 2 drivers. So then one of us has to do 2 qualifyings, and then yeah, and then it still averages between the 3 times, even though 2 of those times would be set by one and the same driver. Another thing is that each qualifying is 15 minutes, and there is a break of 7 minutes in between those. You are not allowed to change anything on the car except for the tires between the qualifying. You actually you're not allowed to even put it inside the box. It has to stay outside of the box, so marshals and everyone can see it, so that you're not doing anything. So then another important thing is that you're not allowed to refuel between qualifyings. So you have to fuel the car once and then do all 3 qualifyings in on that fuel load. So obviously whoever does the first qualifying would have the heaviest car out of the 3 drivers, if you have 3 drivers, right? I mean that should make sense. And then the third driver, which would be the last one to qualify, would have the lightest car. And mind you, this car uses about 2 liters per lap, so which is roughly 2 kilograms. Well, not exactly, but let's imagine it's roughly 2 kilograms per lap. And so in qualifying on these tires, because these are endurance tires, these are not the kind of tires that you would normally have on a formula car. They're a bit harder, and it normally takes 2 to 3 laps to actually reach the peak of the tire, and sometimes even more. So normally they would do 6 to 7 laps in quali, which amounts to about 14 liters of fuel, because you need 2 liters per lap, and 14 times 3, because you need 3 qualifyings, would be 45 liters of fuel, or like 50 to round it up. So you start with 50 liters, or imagine kilograms of weight, of extra weight, which goes down with every qualifying, and the 50 kilograms is significant, because the car weighs now about 900, so 50 is more than 5%. It's like 6% or whatever of the total weight. So obviously, the way they would normally, like the ideal way to qualify would be to arrange it in such a way that the fastest driver qualifies the last, so he has the lightest car, right? And obviously a new set of tires. But another thing, of course, if you have 2 drivers and 3 qualifyings, you would ideally prefer the fastest driver to do 2 qualifyings out of 3, because they average the times. So if the faster guy does 2, then the average will be higher. So during the weekend, my teammate was faster than myself. I think like a bit half a second or something like that. So the original idea was for him to do 2. So I would do first qualifying and he would do second and third. But apparently in the regulations they also say that the bronze driver, and I'm classified as bronze, thank God, has to do the first. He has to be the first one. And the other regulation says that whoever is the first has to be the second. Point is that I had to do Q1 and Q2, and my teammate had to do Q3 only 1. So he still got the lightest car, but he would only do 1 qualifying. So remember earlier I said that we had 3 sets of tires. We decided to use only 2 because yeah, we just wanted to save 1 for the race. I mean, you get 3 allocated to you, and you can do whatever the fuck you want with them. You can do all qualifyings, all 3 of them on 1 set, and then you have 2 new sets for the race, whatever. So I started with a new set in Q1, and then I did Q2 on the same set, which would be a used set by then. And then my teammate would get the lightest car and the new set again. So so he has the best advantage. So the quality that you're looking at right now is my Ferez qualifying on a new set. This is Q1, and then the next one will be Q2 on the same set of tires. Yep, so this is what I wanted sort of to clear out. This is another interesting thing, and it's sometimes kind of missed by a lot of commentators, like people commentating races on television without knowing what the fuck they're actually talking about. For instance, track limits, right? So the track limits. The way I'm driving here is actually legal everywhere, and but we were told specifically on this track in the briefing that they would consider curbs as part of the track. Normally the white line is the limit of the track. The curb is not part of the track. meaning that you have to keep one wheel on the curb, so you can be all four wheels outside of the regular, track limits. But as long as you keep at least one wheel on the curb, you're still legal. Like, kind of makes no sense because it contradicts FIA regulations and all that stuff. But this is what happens in real life. Like, this kind of shit they tell you in the briefing, and it's very common that on some tracks, for instance, in briefing, they would they would tell you that, okay, like Hockenheim, right? Hockenheim T1. We're not gonna look at the track limits, right? As long as you come back into the track before the certain mark, because there is a mark in Hockenheim, we consider it legal. So there's always these these fine prints about track limits, and unless you've been into the actual briefing or somebody told you about it, you would never know. So these regulations are not set in stone, in the sense that in the end it's a race director or stewards who decide what is legal and what is not, and they are free to to decide whatever the fuck they want to decide, depending on the circuit. So, trying to remember what else I wanted to talk about. I think this is a cool down lap, and once we go into the pit lane, I want to show you something else. I don't want to rewind it, not to interrupt this beautiful qualifying. By the way, I'm P1 at this point, 1 second clear of the P2, and this is quite important actually. So, like, really easily P1. Obviously everybody would start with a heavy car and all that stuff, but again, it's same for everyone. Nobody can refuel. And everybody, for sure, everybody in Q1 would be on new tires, because there's no other choice. You don't have any other sets. You have to use new tires in Q1. So now we're about to come in, and I'm not pushing because it's not timed. So this is your normal pit entry, right? Which says 60. Which is a speed limit. But now, once we move further forward, so the way the refueling is done in this championship is not at the box. So the teams are not allowed to use fuel rigs. What happens instead is that I don't know if you see my mouse, like this is my mouse. They have these temporary fuel stations, like normal pumps, like the one you would get at the normal fuel station on the road. So they set those up in these boxes temporarily. They even have a meter and everything on them. So when you want to or need to refuel, you have to stop near the pump station, and normally, well, for sure, there will be mechanics from your team at the certain pump station who would refuel your car. So the procedure is, if you want to refuel, you come in, you go to the right hand side, you look for your mechanics, somewhere there. Well, they will be waving at you or something. Then you stop at the fuel pump, and then you wait for about 100 seconds, because the pump can only do 1 liter per second, and the fuel tank is 100 liters on this car. So then the speed limit here is 60, but the speed limit onto the fuel pumps is 20, and this is kind of interesting thing to keep in mind. So let me just fast forward. So you see it's 20, and normally if I wanted to refuel, which I obviously don't, I would already be there, and these are the fuel pumps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My mechanics would be at one of those stations, and I would stop and I would refuel my car, and then afterwards I would rejoin into the fast lane, and then pit again in front of my garage for the driver change or whatever. So here is where you would have to rejoin the fast lane. So this is the end of refueling area, and from here is from where the pit timer starts. You know, the that one that I was blaming about earlier, the 70 or whatever second one that we use this device to calculate for. It starts from here, not from the actual pit entry, but from here, from the exit from the fueling area and the entry onto the actual pit lane. This is the engineer, Mike, very nice guy, super experienced. I think he's been in motorsport for longer than I have been alive. Amazing dude, amazing. So this is the lollipop guy, who is sort of showing me the lollipop, and the idea is that you need to hit the lollipop with your windscreen, like it's mandatory. You actually need to physically hit it. This is the fuel rig. This is what would normally be used in other championships with different regulations, like in ELMS, which is European Le Mans Series. Then when you're allowed to refuel near your box, then you would use this shit. This dude on the right hand side here, he's holding a hose, and this is the compressed air hose. So when I stop, he connects this thing at the back of my car. So then the these cars, well, I have to clarify, I guess. These cars, GTs and LMP3s, have built-in air jacks. So there is 3, I think it's one here, and one at the back. So not 4, but just 3 air jacks. So the car can lift itself into the air, so you don't need like those devices that they use in Formula 1 when they do a pit stop, like those manual sort of air jacks. Well, not only in Formula 1, in any formula for that matter. So these cars actually carry air jacks on them. I don't know why. Probably because it's just too heavy to be for being lifted manually. So this is like a design choice, but they don't carry the air which is needed to lift itself up. So this dude connects this hose to the back of the car, which pumps air into the air jacks, and then the car is able to lift itself. And it's done completely without without the driver, so I have no control over when I'm lifted or whatever. And once it's in the air, they would put some trolleys under the car so they can slide it inside of the box. They do that in the F1 as well, but they are lifting it manually. Alright, so let's resume. So because I'm staying in the car now, because I'm doing the second qualifying, so I have to stay for 7 minutes. So then the dude starts to clean with the windscreen immediately, which is very helpful, to be honest, because you cannot imagine how much, how many of dead animals are on the windscreen in like 20 minutes. Last year in I think it was in Portugal, at the end of my stint, I could not see fuck all. I couldn't see anything, just because of the corpses of the dead animals smashed against my windscreen. Like, I'm not kidding. You can see the apex of corners, and of course you don't want to use the wiper, because it would just they would just smear those corpses along the windscreen. There's obviously there are no, like, how do you say that, the sprinkles on these cars. It's just a wiper. So all those those insects and all those things stick to your windscreen, and by the end of your stint, it could be actually difficult to see where you're going. So this is kind of a mandatory procedure. Everybody, well, if they have time, they always do that. I think the video will cut at this point somehow, because the way aim camera works, I think it's sensitive to speed or something. So once speed drops below something, it just shuts itself down. We'll see. This is the photographer. I know him from 2015. Very nice guy, French dude. Okay, so it cut off. Here we go with the second one. So this is the second qualifying. Same tires as in the first one, which are used by now. No refueling, so fuel level has dropped. Again, just don't look at the actual value. The point is that it's less than 100, so it's less than full tank. And since I've talked through all of other stuff, I might as well talk through the actual lap. So let me just finish the warm-up, and then again, it's like 11 minutes, so it's not gonna take too much of your time, as long as I don't stop the video, and sure as fuck I will stop the video. So what would you want? What you want to do in the last corner in qualifying, if your next lap is a flying lap, is to prepare the exit. So you're basically sacrificing everything in favor of the exit out of the last corner. This is something that you know, in F1 and everywhere they always do that, and this is something that everybody should do, even in sim racing, of course, because it's you know, it's the same. Which I'm not doing here, because this is not gonna be my flying lap, or maybe it will be my flying lap, but I should have done it better anyway. So normally in Valencia, what you would do is you would go wide here, because again, so normally the white line is the track limit, right? So I can do whatever the fuck I want as long as one wheel is on track. So I can have the whole car onto there as long as just one wheel is on the black stuff, right? So what we would normally do, you would go there to open up the corner to make it smoother. You see that there is a rubber here because everybody's doing that. But the reason why I'm not doing that is because in briefing specifically they said that you are not allowed to do that. You are not allowed to cross these white line. Again, this is something that you could only know if you were in briefing actually, because it makes no sense. I mean, like in the sense of just FIA regulations, right? I can cross this line. This is not pit entry line or whatever line. This is just a line, right? As long as part of my car is inside the track, I can do that. And there is evidence that everybody does that, because it's you know, you see there's a rubber in there. But then race control for this weekend specifically decided that it's not allowed. And that is for good reason, because it's not safe, because people are coming out of the pit lane in there, and it's not safe for you to, you know, to open up the corner when there might be some cars in there. So whatever, and it's safe for everybody. And they actually did penalize people for you know, for being deaf in the briefing. You know, like some people just you know, just look onto their phones or whatever they do, and they just don't listen, and they should be penalized. So I'm completely parallel to the line, so you know, not using any of that which I would otherwise, for sure, I would otherwise use. So now this is legal, even though the left front and possibly the rear, because the steering is relatively straight, so I assume that the rear is parallel to, you know, to the line. Normally this would be illegal because it's out of the track. You see that here is the white line, and my wheel for sure is out of the track. But again, this weekend specifically, they told us that this curb is considered part of the track, so I'm allowed to do that. I could actually be even more aggressive. I could put my wheel here somewhere, you know, like even further. But well, I didn't. So this is the 50. So braking point is like 75 or whatever. There is a mistake with the throttle. If you listen carefully, too impatient. Now, this is something interesting. well, I guess, um, which I mentioned in Discord, that I learned something new from my engineer this weekend, uh, which is kind of, you know, special, because you pretty much know everything already. But sometimes you learn new stuff, especially if you ask questions. So what he said, and I tend to believe him, is that um, uh, so imagine you have this kink right here. Wait, let me just rewind. So this is a kink. This is not a corner. This one, which is here. So there are two ways to take it. So one way is that you can steer less, so be, you know, very smooth or whatever, and the other one, you can steer more, but then you have less distance. What I'm trying to say, one of the ways to do this kink is not to hit the apex here, because it's not necessary. You can do this from any line, right? But you can do it smoother, staying kind of on the outside of the track, or you could do it sort of sharper, hitting the apex. Anyway, what he said was that how do I phrase it? Like long, if you have to turn for less angle but for longer, it scrubs more speed than a small input of a sharper angle for less time. So what it means is that, well, that's what he said. I mean, I don't have empirical proof for that, because we didn't do any back-to-back comparison or whatever. What it means is that you're better off pointing onto this apex here sharply, somewhere, you know, before, against being very smooth around this corner. Because if you do hit this apex, then you save distance, right? Because you travel less meters, but you have more steering input. But if the steering input is very small, like very fast, then supposedly it's beneficial. So this is what I am doing. So going. Whoop! This is the input. This is the pointing. It doesn't look much, but most people would go around the outside. They would not even hit this apex at all, because they would think, and I can understand them, that the less you steer, the less speed you scrub, which is totally true actually. But if you steer very shortly, even though it's a big angle relative to whatever, apparently it's beneficial. You can save, like, I don't know, maybe a hundredth or a couple of hundredths of a second. We are not even talking tenths. It's very, very small. But then, you know, it's free time, so if you can do it, do it. So just again, just to show you, Just pay attention. It's gonna be completely stable, and then at some point it will jerk to the left side, the whole car. Here, yep. And now it's aligned to here, and the steering is, well, as straight as possible. Now this corner, which is the long one, this one is well, I'm doing it similar to some corners in Silverstone, which is I point onto the corner and then I brake. And I was told, you know, many years ago by someone who actually knows his shit, to do that, and as a technique. And I find it better this way. To be honest, this time-wise, it's the same. It's the same as if you did it. Well, let me show it. So you see, I'm already pointed there. Normally, when you brake, right, you want your car being parallel to the outside curb, with the steering wheel straight, of course. I am braking with the steering wheel straight. It is straight, but my car is pointing inwards at this point, and I'm aiming at this apex. While the other way of doing this corner would be go forward and around this, missing this point and then having apex somewhere there. But you know, it's not the way I do it. Like I said, time-wise, it's more or less the same shit. It's just I'm more comfortable doing this. And also, by the way, it makes it more difficult to overtake you, because it's like you're defending, right? It's like you're defending the position for the corner. So if someone follows you at this point, they would think that you're defending, and you actually, I mean, it looks like you are. But for myself, it's just the way to the corner. I'm not defending. It's just my normal driving. So I hit here. This is my first apex, and then the goal is to keep it as tight as possible. No double apexes at all. Just it's very similar to Silverstone. I don't remember the corner name, to be honest, but like one of them is very similar to this mentally, like in approach. So you keep it tight. From somewhere from here you start to accelerate, and this is another thing that I told to my teammates, because we have two cars, and in the other car there were two gentlemen drivers. They had a coach, but you know, I'm always giving my two cents or whatever. But point is, so you probably heard this notion of look ahead, look far ahead, or whatever, as in look to where you want to be, not where you're going, right? And it's all fancy and all of that, and it sounds very philosophical and blah blah blah, but when it comes to real life, like what the fuck does that mean? Like, look ahead, how much ahead? When? Ahead of what? As in, what should I physically do as a driver when you tell me to look far ahead? Like, what do you mean exactly? right? So like explain like how so I can use it. So the explanation is this: in long corners, well, in all corners, but specifically in long corners, there is a point in relation to the corner radius when you need to shift your eyesight, your focus, onto the exit of the corner, and you need to force yourself to do that, because most of the time, if you do it naturally, it would be too late. Most of the time you will be too fixated onto the apex or whatever you're going into immediately. But then again, like, how to spot these moments? So let me explain. In this corner specifically, again, it's corner by corner. So if we rewind, right? So this is the king I was babbling about before. Now the corner will be there. So at this point I'm looking at the outside to make sure I actually use all of the track, or as much as I can use given my tread position. It's relatively okay, could be a bit wider. Now from this point I'm looking here at this apex, because I need to measure the distance, like to calculate how much of a brake pressure I have to actually to be able to slow down. Still looking here, still here, because there's nothing else. So still looking at the apex, looking here, still here. And now it's not visible on the video because you have this this thing here, and also the camera angle is a bit different. But I'm sitting more onto the right side than the camera. The camera is in the middle, right? So I can actually see more of the corner than we can see on the video. So from this point I force myself to stop looking at whatever is directly in front of me, but I force myself to pick a point, or to look at the exit of the corner of the exit curb, which we cannot even see on the video because it's it's a different angle. And point is, if you do that, it's so much easier to convince yourself to go harder on power, because you see how much space you actually have. You know, it's quite amazing. It's like I don't know. I don't want to sound too gay. I mean, it's like expanding your horizons. So in a way, it widens the track, and then due to that, it makes it easier to go more aggressive on power. So remember, at this point I would be looking somewhere at here, because I know there is a service road there which I can use, blah blah blah. So I would be aiming to go there, and I would calculate my throttle application expecting to go there, which is this service road. And there is gonna be another corner like that later. This is a bit messy. This is a very difficult one. So this corner, which is the last one, is also a long corner, and it's amazing how much time you can gain if you just look further ahead. It's amazing. I mean, you cannot really see anything from here, and I can see even less because I'm sitting lower than the camera, and this is like a crest of some point, like it goes uphill and it goes downhill. So if in the previous corner, which was this one, we shifted sight as long as we touched the throttle, like we wanted to calculate how much how aggressive can we be with the throttle depending on the curvature of the corner. Well, in this corner it's a different approach. You need to start looking forward at the very last bit of braking, like when you have like 10% of braking, or 10 bar, or I don't know, 20 bar or whatever, like when you're releasing and you're almost done releasing. This is when you want to look further. Stop looking at the apex and look at the exit, because if you do that, then you will naturally just drop the brake. So it would be so much, it would just come naturally, just so easy to release the brake faster than otherwise. So your minimum will jump, and you know, and everything. So the idea is the same. I mean, you still need to look further, but the point in where exactly you need to shift your eyesight in relation to what you are doing with your body, with your legs and your hands, is different. While here you want to judge the acceleration. Well, here you want to judge the braking, or the minimum speed or whatever. So this is what I mean, like when they say like look further, but when exactly? Well, this is corner dependent. Is when exactly? Because it's not a universal thing. You cannot always look, you know, 50 meters ahead or whatever, because then you will be missing apexes, because you need to look at the apex. You actually do to a certain point. So anyway. I'm still here, by the way. So, like I said, there were a couple of things that kind of new ones that I heard from the engineer. Um, in one of my documents, I think it was the first one, on Google Docs or whatever, I wrote that when you set up the corner, and the setup is the correct word to use, like when you approach the corner, you need to set it up. You need to brake properly, blah blah blah, and steer properly, so it's like the car is in a proper state. So when you do that, you have, well, two goals, kind of. You need to brake as late as possible, and you need to have the car balanced, and you need to have both, not just one, because it's very easy to brake very early and then car does fuck all and you're very balanced, very flat into the corner, no problem. And then again you can brake very late, but then the car has too much pitch, and once you turn it starts to slide, you lose the rear or whatever. So I had this conversation with Mike, with the engineer, last weekend. We were looking at the data of myself against my teammate, and I was braking harder and shorter generally, and but having more problems in the middle of the corner. And the takeaway out of this is that depending on the car setup, and this is very important, depending on how your car is set up, the suspension and iron, everything, it may require different amount of braking. Again, it's also corner dependent, to have it balanced. What I'm trying to say, that let's say the maximum braking performance of the car is 100 units or whatever, and in a specific corner, theoretically, well, you can use 100 units of braking performance, and by braking performance I mean the grip that the tires have, the friction of the pads, or whatever the fuck, right? But depending on how the car is set up, sometimes you have to use just 80%, just because otherwise it will be too much brake, too much pitch, and you will not be able to turn for this specific corner, because it can be quite a sharp one. So the takeaway from here is that depending on the car setup and the corner, it is okay to underuse the available grip. Like, you are not braking as efficiently as you could have, as your tires allow, whatever, but you are braking in such a way that allows you to have the balanced car. And in the end, with this car, with this setup, this is the most efficient way. It's like underusing brakes would be the fastest way to go around the corner on this specific car, on this specific corner. And going back to our LMP3, the general problem with LMP3 is understeer. It's like there's not enough front. So the way to cure understeer is to have more pitch, to have more weight transfer onto the front. So, you know, this car, which is set up brilliantly, by the way, for like I said, the engineer is amazing, is to have more pitch, more weight transfer to the front, just to kill the understeer. because it's the most important. But at the same time, it makes the rear axle too light. So if you brake very late, you're not locking, nothing. I mean, you're just using the brakes the way you should. Then you have to turn quite sharply. But if you turn quite sharply, then you have oversteer on entry because the rear is too light. But the rear was too light on purpose. It was specifically to transform away to the front. So this specific setup would favor someone who brakes a little bit earlier or a little bit less. I mean, doesn't matter if it's earlier or later, but a bit less, as in weight transfer. Maybe rolls a little bit, because he has to roll, because he finished braking way too early, and then there's nothing to do but roll. And for this car specifically, for this setup, it's fine. While, like in an ideal world, if this was Formula 3, for instance, like 312, right? And if this was the car that we could set up however the fuck we wanted, like F3, like change caster and, you know, pick up points and geometry and whatever, okay, then we could have set it up like properly, as in to benefit the latest braking and the without compromising the corner. But this is not the case. This is the car we have, this is the chassis we have, and as per regulations there are certain things we can do and we cannot do. So this is the optimal way to drive this car, is actually to not use the whole performance of the brakes in every corner. This is something that, I mean, it sounds obvious, but I haven't thought about that before, you know, because as a driver you always want to brake as late as possible, as hard as possible, be always on the verge of locking and all of that. But sometimes it's actually slower. I mean, it's because the car is shit, but the car is the way it is. If it's shit, it's shit. Who you know, whatever. So this piece of shit in front is what do you call it? I think it's LMP3 or GT. Oh no, sorry, LMP4 or GT4, something 4. So it's slow as fuck. It's only one car in this category, and it was put with us. I mean, I'm not saying that the drivers are shit or the car is shit, or you know, I mean, I'm saying this is a piece of shit. I don't mean it's the you know, the I don't know the drivers or the car. They may be as professional as anyone, but it's slow as fuck. It's so annoying. But kudos to him, he lets me through. Thank you very much for not ruining my quali lap. So at this point I think I'm cooling down. And so how the tires work, right? The new ones. So the way they are manufactured, let me think how to explain it properly. So imagine that you go to a grocery store, right? And you buy some how do you say, like, what is in English? You know, like that shit that you make the cake out of. It's not flour, it's like a complete mix, as if you can do something with it and it becomes a cake, right? But it's not a cake. You didn't buy it as a cake. You still need to bake it. It has all the ingredients, it's all mixed and blah blah blah. It has the instructions on the side of the box and all of that. But you cannot eat it as a cake, you need to cook it. So this is precisely how new tires work, and this is how you should think of them. So they are not cooked yet, and like actually on the chemical level, it's actually true. They are like chemically not cooked yet, and this is on purpose. So there is this. Oh, this is gonna be a very long video. I'm sidetracking so much. So there is this notion of heat cycles, and they are kind of more important than tire wear. And heat cycles is well, as it says, the every instance when you warm up the tires and then they cool down, you warm them up again, so it's another heat cycle. So with the first heat cycle, the molecules inside the tire rearrange themselves. This is why you get this grip, this peak of grip, is because it was undercooked. You know, from the factory, it was not complete, and then you warm it for the first time, and now it's a cake. It's not, you know, this a box of flour anymore. It's the actual cake you can eat, but you have to cook it properly, of course. So yeah. So, and this is how you should sort of treat the new tyrants. So where I was going with this is that, so once you cook them once, right? So they were new. You cooked them. You ate them, as in you're eating the cake. So you had maybe like half of the cake or whatever. So then what? Well. So now you're not hungry anymore. Well, let's imagine, right? So you just ate half of the cake. So what do you do next? You still have the other half of the cake. So you can throw it away, or you can store it. The ideal scenario would be to throw it away and have another, bag of flour or whatever to make another cake, because new one is always better than the old one. But if you are limited on the amount of cakes you can use per qualifying, then you kind of have to store it. So what would like a normal person do with a half-eaten cake? Well, you put it in some wrapping, maybe in some plastic something or whatever, and you put it in the fridge. So you cool it down. because it's good for the cake. You cook it, you cool it down. You don't freeze it, obviously, but it can last longer in the fridge than in a hot sun. And then later, maybe next day or whatever, or maybe the same day, but in the evening, you get it out of the fridge, you warm it up again, because now it's cool. You warm it up again, and then you can eat it again. Hopefully it tastes the same as the new one. And now, where I'm getting to with all of this is how you should treat tires. So you have this first peak of grip, right? The first heat cycle, or the first proper heat cycle, let's say. And you do your run, and you fuck it up for whatever reason. It was traffic, or well, who cares, right? So the only chance for you to save the qualifying or whatever is to cool the tires down as much as you can, because for some miraculous reasons they kind of recover grip for one more time. And on most tires, not all of them, but on most compounds, the second run, like the second pushing attempt after the cooldown, can be maybe within a tenth or within 2/10 as the first run. But if you made a half a second mistake on the first one, right, then your second one will still be 3/10 faster. So you can improve over yourself, even though it's it's not ideal already. I mean, the peak is past and whatever, but the way to salvage your quality is to cool them down and then to attempt again. This is not relevant for Formula 1 on Pirellis, by the way, because they're fucked after one lap completely, but it's relevant to pretty much all of the other series. So what I'm doing here is I'm cooling down, because by this time I know that I'm not P1. I think Mike already told me that I'm P2 or something at this point, so I'm cooling the tires down to try and attempt another run. And the reason why I'm P2 actually is because, remember, there are 3 tires for qualifying, 3 sets of tires for qualifying. So teams that had 3 drivers, right, instead of 2, for instance, or even maybe some who even had 2, they could use new tires, and they sure as fuck did. So the guys in front of me are most likely on new tires in this qualifying, while I am on the old ones, well, the used ones from the previous one. And again, this second heat cycle, it is never going to be as good as the first one, unless track changes or something, or the weather or whatever. I mean, okay, I'm going to wrap it up soon, I promise. By the way, I was taught how to cool the tires down in 2012. That was amazing year, by the way. In Renault, it was my second proper season in Renault, and like, the way to cool them down is you need to go like 20 seconds slower, and it's hard. And on this run now, I will actually not do that. think I will go like 10 seconds slow or something. Some short shifting everywhere, lifting before the corner and all of that shit. Now, when you cool the tires down, what you need to remember is not to overdo it. Normally, sector 3, and on this track there is 4 sectors, but let's say the last sector is when you have to start pushing again, because otherwise they will be too cold actually. So you need to bring them up to the temperature before the end of your cooldown lap, and this is what I'm doing here. Then hopefully I will try to prepare the last corner. I haven't watched this video, so I don't know. I don't remember. Kind of. So you see this thing is green. The unit on the left hand side is green, which means that in this part of the track, I'm not sure actually how it works precisely, but like in this part of the track I'm faster than the reference. Basically, this is what it means that it's green. I am obviously not looking at it, but I'm looking at on the track. And now you see here is 2 red ones, which means I'm slower than the reference on this part of track. Which is not surprising because I'm on used tires. I don't know what I'm doing with my hand. Like, look at the hand, at the left hand. The fuck am I doing? I don't know. This is radio button. I think by this time I'm saying that this is it. I cannot go quicker, and I obviously I remember saying that. And if you look at this aim time, it's a tiny bit slower than the best one, and it's kind of, yeah, the way it was. So I'm talking to Mike, and he's gonna tell me to box this lap. save tires. I'm letting someone through because you don't need to be an asshole to everybody. Alright guys, I'm running out of copyright-free music. It's only 1 hour 35 minutes long. The one I have on YouTube. So yeah, this is it. It's not so much of a data rant, but kind of just a general rant, I guess. So yeah, hopefully it was educational, at least for some of you, or if not educational, then maybe at least just something you could listen to on your headphones while taking a dump or something. And I will see you in the next one.